Okay, this is literally one of my favorite nursing stories to tell, so I'm gonna tell it. I was working in the ICU. I was taking care of this very elderly patient who had a very elderly spouse, and this patient was in the ICU for respiratory failure and they were on a BiPAP mask. This patient had a very skinny, narrow face, and we were not able to get a great seal on the BiPAP mask because the patient did not have top teeth or bottom teeth. Because their dentures weren't in, their cheeks were kind of skinny here and left this gaping hole in the BiPAP, so we weren't able to get a good seal. This patient did not want to be intubated, and so the BiPAP was kind of our last resort to try and help this patient. I've been trying all the things to try and get a good seal, but ultimately I needed this patient's dentures in to kind of fill their face out some more in order to get that good seal, but we didn't carry denture glue in our ICU, and the poor patient's spouse is like, well, I can go get some. I was like, we actually sell some in our gift shop, so if you want to walk down and get some and bring it back up, we can try to get those dentures in nice and tight and get a good seal on the BiPAP. This whole ordeal, because the patient's spouse is super elderly and I felt so bad, but luckily they were willing to go down and get the denture glue. So they come back, they bring it, we put it on, we get those teeth nice and in, and we get the BiPAP on, it's sealing great, and I'm like, sweet, we're good. Fast forward 10, 15 minutes later, the patient's spouse comes out to me and goes, hey, did you take the patient's dentures out? And I'm like, no, I haven't been back in the room since, and I don't think anyone's gone in the room, but let me call my RT. Maybe they snuck in without me seeing. Maybe they did some sort of adjustment, because I'm like, I haven't touched the dentures. We just made this whole big ordeal about getting them in. I'm like, where did they go? RT happens to be walking by, and I'm like, hey, did you do anything with the patient's dentures in this room? And the RT is like, no. And immediately at the same time, we look at each other like, we know where these dentures are. We rush into the room and we take the BiPAP mask off, and we have the patient open up super wide, and we can see the patient's dentures, just the very tail end of them, all the way back in the throat. This patient had the biggest, most gaping throat I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't even know how this was possible. I don't know where the patient's gag reflex was. I think this patient was just way too sick that they just didn't even quite know what was going on. So we took a pair of hemostats and reached in and we pulled the dentures out, and I was like, oh my goodness, that literally was about to be so bad. And that's my swallowing dentures story. I will never forget it. Now you probably won't forget it either.